Few shows on TV love a reset button more than What We Do in the Shadows. It's built into the cartoon logic that lets the series go completely bonkers as needed. You can send a character into space, turn another into a kid for a year, or otherwise mess up your main cast for laughs, because the show is so willing to handwave the whole thing away as soon as the joke has run its course. Guillermo's change into a vampire was always going to be a tricky beast, though, whether the show sticks with it, or, as it does in tonight's 5th season finale, Exit Interview, decides to walk it back. Gizmo's desire to be a vampire isn't some one-episode joke, or even a single-season story like Baby Cullen was last year. It's a core part of his character and his relationships with everyone else in the vampire residence. Just as importantly, it's always added a darker shade to a character who would otherwise be in occasional danger of crossing the line from sweet to too sweet. He can argue over the details in his talking head chats all he wants, but Guillermo has been in some fights in pursuit of what he's always believed was his heart's deepest wish. Dealing with all that, and going back to normal, was always going to be tough. First and foremost, attention is given to Guillermo, Harvey Guillen, who is having a hard time getting used to being a vampire. His obvious worry that his sire, Nander Kovan Novak, may eventually find out he betrayed him is clear as he struggles with it. The plot also follows the guide, Kristen Schaal, a person who has gradually grown more lonely inside her adopted vampire community. Her work is often ignored, and her vampire buddies often take her for granted. This plot line has been a deep look at who you are and where you belong that has touched the audience. The character's special invites to a weekend at Perdita Morrigan's awesome house bring the excitement to a high point as the shows go on. The story of the famous person, known as the Big Shot of vampire high society in the New World, goes all the way back to the Mayflower trip. The chance of such a thing creates a buzz and excitement. The pretty front, meanwhile, quickly starts to crumble, showing hidden mess and surprises. The show makes it clear that the guide, a seemingly regular character introduced earlier in the season, has been pulling the strings secretly. She sets up traps and challenges for the vampires based on their special features and weak spots. The fact that a curse messes with Nadia is one of the surprises. Her run-ins with Madame de Buterne, whose picture is shown in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and the curse seem to be connected. Guillermo faces Nander about his longtime feelings of betrayal and bad treatment. He shares his hurt and annoyance at being overlooked, which starts a big fight between the two main characters. The guide has been doing oil paintings of each vampire, showing she really gets their personalities and pasts, as revealed in the show The Portraits. The show highlights Nander's selfish moves and his lack of care for Guillermo's needs and feelings. The fight between them gets worse because of this find, which also makes people wonder about their future together. Vanessa Bayer pops up as Perdita Morrigan, who seems to be the Manor's weekend host. But later it's clear that she's part of the guide's trick. The show digs into how the vampires feel as a group. It looks at their weak spots, worries, and how they affect each other, giving their personal growth more layers. Each vampire in Morrigan Manor faces a different issue during their stay. These problems show their personalities and quirks, causing both funny bits and time to think. The stay makes people worry about the group's loyalty and trust. The vampires have to face their special roles and the problems they find as secrets come out and things heat up. A quick wrap-up of the last show, A Weekend at Morrigan Manor, which had the vampires facing challenges from the guide, comes before this one. The wrap-up points out how Derek's change of Guillermo into a vampire caused trouble and conflict. Guillermo's change, Guillermo, who has been turned by Derek into a vampire, is the main focus of this show. His change into a vampire, however, doesn't go as planned. Guillermo has a hard time accepting he's a vampire because he can't kill a human even after turning into one. To try to get Guillermo to change his mind, Nander sets up a bunch of tests that put his commitment to being a vampire on the line. Nander first imagines a situation where Guillermo is fully accepted as a vampire and even goes on a brief wild spree using the djinn. Guillermo can't kill because of his kindness, hinting he might not be cut out for a vampire's life. Guillermo's human side and his friendships with the other vampires come into play as Nander keeps trying to make him more of a vampire. The friendship between Guillermo and Nadia, Cullen, and Laszlo is spotlighted in the show, as each of them says goodbye to him in their own way. These scenes show how Guillermo's change has shifted him, but his connections to his vampire buddies haven't got weaker. Nander gets that Guillermo's commitment to Nander was why he wanted to be a vampire. This leads to a key moment where Nander faces Guillermo about his real reasons after catching Derek. Guillermo's inability to harm Derek shows Nander that he has a kind heart, not a vampire one. In the end, the show makes it clear that Guillermo's change into a vampire was just a quick switch. Nander takes out Derek to turn back the change after realizing Guillermo will stick with him as his helper. Guillermo is turned back into a human by this choice, which shakes things up. The show wraps up with a talk about the impact of Guillermo's aims and actions. There's a feeling of wrapping up and thinking as the folks come to terms with the ups and downs they've gone through, despite the spooky stuff and funny bits.